Hey guys, it's Zennial Gamer, and this is like my first planned prepared video. So, thank you seriously for taking the time to watch it. Especially thank you for those of you who have subscribed, and and for those of you who are about to, button down below. So with that said, I'm going to jump straight into it. Today we're going to be talking about an easier way to assess a rune's efficiency. It's not an exact 100% system, but what it is a way to really quickly evaluate whether or not a rune is worth keeping and whether or not it's worth kind of continuing to test and scrap it, like take it to plus 3, 6, and 9. Uh, if you're not familiar with rune efficiency, to start off with, rune efficiency is a complicated mathematical formula that will allow you to compare your rune to the theoretical perfect rune. So if a perfect rune is 100% efficiency and your rune is 90% efficiency, then your rune is 90% as good as the perfect rune. But as I said, it's kind of a complicated math formula, and there are a lot of tools out there to help you. There's Swap, Summoner's War Optimizer, there's spreadsheets, there's efficiency calculators, there's a lot of stuff, but they all take a lot of work either in the setup or in manually typing in information. And when you're doing things on scale, like if you're working through a lot of runes after a big farming session, it can be a little tedious. And I don't look at the efficiency of every single rune. I try and narrow it down to just the good runes first. And the way I do that is with a system I call counting hits. So to start off with, let's talk about what I call a hit. There's certain things that you all probably know about runes. You know these without me having to tell you them. But it helps if you put them all together in your mind and think of them as a single fact instead of a set of facts. To begin with, runes start off with a certain number of substats based on the quality of the rune. So for example, a hero rune would have 3 substats, right? And then it may have an innate stat as well. So for our purposes, I want you to think of the substats that the rune starts off with as the initial inscriptions, because they're all random rolls just like an inscription is, right? So a hero rune would have 3 initial inscriptions plus an innate stat, and then we're going to inscribe the rune up to plus 12. And every 3 hits or every 3 inscriptions on that rune gives us an additional substat or increases an existing substat, right? So those are additional inscriptions. And so if you put it all together, what you have is 1 innate inscription, 4 initial inscriptions, and 4 additional inscriptions for a total of 9. So a legend rune with an innate will get 9 inscriptions on it. Now every inscription has a range. Like resistance is a minimum 4, maximum 8, crit damage, same thing. We don't need to worry about the range because we're trying to simplify the math, right? So all we're going to worry about is the maximum number. Now, basically, every substat that you can put on a rune, except for flats, we're going to talk about flat stats later, but every percentage-based stat that you can put on a rune is going to be plus 8 as a maximum, except for crit rate, which is plus 6, and then speed is plus 6. So another way to think of it is speed and crit rate have a maximum of 6 and everything else has a maximum of 8. And you can just simplify it right like that. Now, what is a hit? A hit is 1 maximum level inscription. So plus 8 attack, plus 8 hit points, hit point percentage, plus 6 crit rate, plus 6 speed. Each of those is what I call 1 hit. So what if you have 9 speed? Then that's 1.5 hits, right? So how many hits can a rune have? Well, it can have 9 inscriptions, and every inscription can have its max, so a rune can have 9 hits, right? Now, not every hit is going to be a maximum inscription. Certainly not for me, anyway, not for most of us. But for one example, for argument's sake, if you look on the screen, let's say we have a rune that has 8 accuracy and 8. It starts with 8 attack, 8 hit points, 8 defense, 6 speed, and then as you're inscribing, you get all maximum inscriptions. And they're spread out a little bit, so you wind up with that same innate accuracy, but you have 18 speed, 16 HP, 16 defense, and 8 attack. That is going to be like a perfect rune. It's about 100% efficiency. It's not exactly 100% efficiency, or it may not be, because the true efficiency formula includes an assessment of what slot the rune is. So obviously, for example, a slot 4 rune hit point percentage, right? That's going to be more efficient than, say, if we had a slot 4 flat stat. Slot 1 runes, they all have attack, flat attack on them. So the formula is going to evaluate the different slots differently, and then the specific stats on the rune, the base root stat, like that one, flat attack on the slot 1. The efficiency formula evaluates each rune differently. Again, for our purposes, we're looking to evaluate, so we're not going to worry about that. And we're just going to say 9 hits equals 100%, so 9 hits is a perfect rune. What if the rune isn't perfect, which it usually isn't, right? As an example, we have on the screen here, let's say the rune rolls, after you've inscribed it to plus 12, you wind up with 8% attack, 13% HP, 19 defense. What we're going to do is add those together. We're going to actually add everything that has a maximum of 8 together, and then we're going to add everything that has a maximum of 6 together. So basically we add our speed and our crit rate together, and then we add everything else together. So in our example here, 8 plus 13 plus 19 is 40. And then we're going to divide that by the maximum inscription level. In other words, we're going to divide it by 8. So 40 divided by 8 is 5. If you're not comfortable doing division, you could just kind of count up the other way too. You could go 8, 16, 24, 32, 40 is 5. There's the camera. So whichever way you want to do it, divide or just kind of add up. We're never going to get into big numbers because the highest possible rune is 9. So you can do it as simple as you're comfortable with. Then we're going to do the same thing with speed and crit rate. We're going to add them together. So in our example here, we have 12 speed and 6 crit rate in 8, and that adds up to 18. 18 divided by 6 is 3. So we have 3 hits from our speed and crit rate. We have 5 hits from everything else. When we put those together, we wind up with 8 hits. Now, a perfect rune is 9, and this rune has 8 hits. So you might think it's as simple as saying, so the efficiency is 8 divided by 9, but it's not. Just because, again, efficiency calculates the base stats that come with the rune. It calculates the 118 attack or the 160 attack of those runes that I'm showing on screen right now. So what we're trying to do with our quick little evaluation here is to figure out how far from 100 we actually are. So we're going in the opposite direction. So we're not going to take 8 divided by 9. Instead, we're going to count how many hits away from 100 we are, which means we're going 9 minus 8 equals 1. So we're 1 hit away from 100. Now, every hit is worth about 7% efficiency. So what we're going to do next is just take 100% minus 7%, and we're going to say that our example rune was 93%. Now, because this was all on text on the other side, I want to do a couple of runes, but I want to find some ungrinded runes here, and I'm going to do an example with real runes. So the rune that we have showing on screen right now, crit damage, HP, and accuracy all have a max inscription of 8, so we're going to add those together. It's 11 plus 11 plus 6, which is 28. Then we're going to figure out how many hits that is. We have 8, 16, 24 is 3 hits, and then half of another hit to get to 28, so it's 3.5 hits. We have no crit rate, and we have 15 speed. So it's 6, 12, and half of another hit is 2.5. So we now have 2.5 hits on the plus 6s, 3.5 hits on the plus 8s. We put those together, and that's 6 hits. So then we take 9 minus 6 is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. So I'm 21% away from a perfect rune, which means I'm about 79% efficiency. Let me do another example here. Okay, so on this one, we've got 5 attack and 7 resistance is 12, which is just 1.5 hits, right? And then we've got 9 crit rate and 14 speed, which is 23. And because we're just doing a quick evaluation, I'm going to round that off, and I'm going to call that about 4 hits. So I've got 1.5 hits on the plus 8s. I've got about 4 hits on the speed and crit rate, which is 5.5 hits. That's going to give me a rune somewhere around 75% efficiency. 75% efficiency, by the way, not great. And there's a concept that I'm going to express in the next video called rune potential. And rune potential is like, what will the rune look like after I've gemmed and grinded it? So with the rune that we have on screen here as an example, if you were to gem that resistance for HP and then grind the speed attack and HP, the rune would probably come out to be a little over 100% efficiency. A little under, a little over, right around there. Still not a great rune, but definitely it has the potential. And so that's what we'll talk about in the next video, is how you determine what rune potential is. For our purposes now, we know this rune's about 75% efficiency. So let's do one more example of, actually let's do an inscription example over here. So we'll start with, that rune's kind of junk. Let's start with this one. Actually, that rune's worse. Okay, we'll go with this one. So to start off with, this rune we have 4 speed and 6 crit rate is 10. We have 4 crit damage and 8 resistance is 12. So we've got about 1.5 and 1.5, which means we have about 3 hits right now. We're going to get to inscribe it 4 times. So our maximum that we could get off of this thing is about 7 hits, right? This is really not a very good rune. It'll probably get sold unless it just goes crazy on the speed. So if we basically quad rolled speed or probably even triple rolled speed with another hit to crit rate, we might keep it. But instead we just hit crit damage and we had a minimum crit damage hit. So I would normally just sell this rune right there probably. But since we're doing the video, we'll take it out to +6 and we'll give it one more shot to hit speed. We did hit speed. So now we are gonna take it out to +9 and see if we can get one more speed. So as we're going though, we're going to evaluate this again. We've got 16 speed and crit rate, and we've got 16 crit damage and resistance. So I've got 2 hits on the +8s, and I've got just under 3 hits on the +6s. Now that resistance hit really probably destroyed this rune. I would sell it from here. But for our demonstration purposes, 16 divided by 3 is about 2.75 hits. 16 divided by 6 obviously is about 2.75 hits. And 23 divided by 8, about 3 hits. So it's about 5.75 hits right now. We can inscribe it one more time. So it has the chance to get to about 7 hits or to get to about an 85% efficiency range, which is a good efficiency. But because it's not grindable and because the stats don't mix together well, it's not a good rune. All right, let's do one more example here. See if we can find a better rune that's worth looking at and that's not grinded. Some pretty crappy runes in here. All right, let's just do this one. So we've got 14 crit rate and 10 speed is 24. 24 divided by 6 is 4. And then we've got 4 crit damage and 8 resistance is 12. 12 divided by 8, 1.5. So this has 5.5. We're 3.5 away from 100%, which means we're about 25% away, which means it's about a 75 efficiency rune. So hopefully you've got the idea on how you calculate how far away you are from 100. Now what about flat stats? I haven't talked about flats at any point yet so far, right? So let's find something with a flat over here. Now generally, I gem away most flat stats if I can. There's a couple of exceptions, mostly on slots 1 and 3. And I'll go more in depth into when you do not gem away flat stats on the potential video. But if you are going to keep the flat stat, then we have to count it into the efficiency formula, right? Now memorizing the ranges of the flat stats and then doing math with them gets really complicated because you have hit points that can go up in the hundreds and defense that still can get some pretty funky numbers. And we're trying to do a quick evaluation. So again, we're not looking for perfect math on efficiency. We're looking to decide if the rune is worth proceeding with. And so what I do is I say the average monster has 10,000 hit points. so 100 hit points is 1% HP. The average monster has 700 defense, so 7 defense is 1% defense. And 700 attack average, so 7 attack is 1%. Is that the exact average? I have no idea. What matters, though, is that if I have a rune with a lot of flat HP, I'm not going to be putting it on Khali with 6,000 base HP. I'm going to be putting it on a monster with more HP. And so then it will more likely be 1% HP because it's going on a higher HP monster. Also, we want to do easy numbers for quick math. To say 100 HP equals 1%, that's easy. If we tried to break it down into 76.4 HP equals 1%, not so easy. So how do we calculate a flat stat? Well, look at the rune that we have on screen, 694 HP. We're just going to round that off to 700, and we're going to call that 7% HP. So when we evaluate this rune, we have 14 accuracy, plus 7 HP is 21, plus 21 attack is 42. 42 divided by 8 is about 5.25, so 5.25 hits. And then we have one more hit for the 6 speed, so this is 6.25 hits, which means we're 2 3/4 hits away from 9, or about 18% away from 9, so it's actually about an 82% rune. Your next question is probably, what do I do with it? Like, what percentage runes should I keep? There is no specific percentage that you keep because we're all at different stages of the game. Myself personally, I try to keep, kind of going back into that rune potential thing that we'll talk about, I try to keep only runes that are going to reach at least 100% after they're gemmed and grinded. At least for slots 1 and 3. For slot 5, I shoot for 105%. For slots 2, 4, and 6, I go a little bit lower, depending on the rune and how much I need them. As a really rough, my opinion, 100% my opinion rule, 87% runes are about C1, 91 are C2, 95 are C3, and on down. 100% runes are, and when I say 100% rune, I'm talking about kind of like the rune set. So if you have a monster that's 100% efficiency throughout it all, that's about a Guardian level rune monster. 107% is when you're getting up into that G2 range. 115% or higher is probably for G3. And again, remember, you can only get to 100% before you gem and grind, so obviously a rune's potential and what you do through raid is what's going to separate you in those upper echelons. But figuring out if a rune has the chance to get there starts with knowing what efficiency it has as soon as you pull it from a dungeon and then as you're inscribing it. And so I hope that you find the hit system as an easier way to evaluate whether or not those runes are kept. And I hope you find this helpful. Thank you, everybody, for watching my first video. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video when we talk about potential. Hey, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please pop that subscribe button over on the left. It shows me that you enjoyed the video, but more importantly, it shows me that you found the information useful and hopefully it helped you in your gameplay. So here's the deal. You pop subscribe, and I'll keep popping out content. Thanks, guys.